In a world where tradition and power intertwine, Mansi's new life in her husband's ancestral home starts to spiral when she uncovers unsettling truths hidden behind age old customs. Tonight, we journey into the heart of a family bound by secrets and whispers. A tale where one woman's discovery threatens to unravel the very foundation of her world. Welcome to Echoing Tales, where silence speaks louder than words. Tonight's story is titled Veil of Traditions. In the remote village of Aranmula, nestled in the heart of South India, the Taravan family was feared throughout the village and beyond. Gopinathan Taravan, the patriarch, ruled over his vast estates with an iron fist. His cruelty whispered about among the villagers. His ancestral home, a towering mansion with high walls, held secrets that no outsider had ever uncovered. Gopinathan's wife, Sumati, was his third. The first two had been mysteriously sent back to their families after giving birth to daughters, never to be spoken of again. Sumati, however, had given him 5 sons, 4 of whom were already married. Rumors swirled in the village about the women in Gopinathan's household, silent and submissive, their lives confined to the walls of the grand mansion. Servants who passed through spoke of the beautiful women who moved like ghosts, docile, diligent, and resigned to their fate. They performed their duties with robotic precision, spoke only in whispers, and never stepped out of line. The family searched far and wide for a bride for Sarjan, the youngest son, but no one wanted to send their daughters into a household ruled by strict traditions and harsh authority, especially knowing Sarjan was both mute and intellectually challenged. That was until they found Mansi. Mansi, strikingly beautiful and sharp-witted, came from a distant land. Her father, aware of Sarjan's condition, had kept it from her, believing it was a small price to pay for securing her future. She discovered the truth soon after the wedding. Her husband was intellectually disabled. But by then it was too late. Her father had already abandoned her to her fate, leaving her with a family she barely knew, in a place that felt foreign and cold. Mansi carried a secret of her own. She was partially deaf. Her father had concealed this from Sarjan's family, fearing they would never accept her if they knew. Though Mansi had protested, desperate to reveal the truth, she quickly understood why he had hidden it. The moment she arrived, the suffocating reality of a new life set in. The women in the house barely spoke, and her husband's silence only made it easier for her to keep her own secret. If they knew about her hearing loss, she was certain they would discard her without hesitation, just as her father had. Trapped and isolated, Mansi realized there was no turning back. She had no choice but to protect herself, and so she decided to hide a secret for as long as she could. When she missed instructions or didn't respond to the men in the household, they assumed it was defiance, growing angrier with each misunderstanding. But that was a small price to pay for keeping her secret intact. Mansi was fiercely independent and well educated. Another reason her father had married her off hastily, hoping that this strict traditional family would break her spirit. What he hadn't realized was that Mansi was not one to be broken. She quickly learned how to navigate the household, masking her disability with grace, silently defying their expectations, and determined to survive on her own terms. From the moment she arrived, Mansi's outspokenness clashed with the rigid expectations of the Gopinathan household. The first incident occurred when Gopinathan berated her for a minor mistake in the kitchen. Unlike her sisters-in-law, who would have lowered their heads, Mansi met his gaze and said, "Respect must go both ways." The room fell eerily silent. The other women remained indifferent, oblivious to the tension. Gopinathan, fuming, stormed out, but Mansi stood firm. Next, when Sumati ordered her to stay silent during meals, Mansi replied, "If we don't speak, how will anyone know what we think?" Sumati's face remained blank, like a puppet with no will of her own, but Mansi's brother-in-law harshly reprimanded her instead. The third incident came when Gopinathan demanded she stop reading, claiming education wasn't for women. Mansi calmly replied, "Knowledge isn't bound by gender. Ignorance, however, seems to be." Again, her brother-in-law scolded her, while Sumati and the other women sat unmoved, their eyes dull and empty. Mansi couldn't understand why none of them fought back or even supported her. It was as if they were trapped in a trance, their free will drained. Despite her defiance, Mansi couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something was deeply wrong within the household. Every night, without fail, the entire family except for Mansi during her first month descended into the mansion's dark, sprawling basement for what they called the family ritual. She would hear the heavy creak of the wooden doors closing behind them, and when they emerged hours later, the men looked content, almost elated, while the women appeared drained, their faces pale and their eyes dull, as if life had been siphoned out of them. Curiosity nagged at Mansi, but whenever she cautiously brought it up with her sisters-in-law, their answers were evasive. "It's for the family's good," one of them would murmur with a weak smile, while another would say, "You will understand when the time comes." But no one ever explained what happened in that basement, and the tension between what they said and how they looked left Mansi feeling even more unsettled. Even the servants, who seemed to know the family's most intimate routines, kept their distance when it came to the ritual. They busied themselves with their tasks whenever Mansi broached the topic, their hands quick and their eyes averted. Only one, an old woman who had served the family for decades, seemed unfazed by her questions. But whenever Mansi asked her directly, the woman would cluck her tongue and shake her head. "Curiosity is not a woman's virtue," she'd say, her voice thick with disapproval. "Best leave well enough alone, child. Some things are not meant to be known by those who are better off not asking." Mansi's frustration grew, but with every vague answer and cryptic warning, the sense of dread deepened. Something was happening in that basement, something powerful and terrifying, and she was sure that when her time came to join them, it would change everything. After a month of waiting, the day finally arrived. Her mother-in-law, Sumati, stepped into the room, flanked by her sisters-in-law. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud, sealing Mansi in a silence that weighed heavily on her. Sumati's face was unreadable as she stepped forward, her voice calm and deliberate. "It is time," she said softly, her words dripping with an air of finality. "Tonight, you will join us in a very sacred ritual. Prepare yourself. Dress in your finest sari. Seek your husband's blessings." Mansi's heart raced. A ritual? Why now? And why did she need Sergeant's blessings for something like this? Still, she held her tongue. She had been curious for weeks, and now that the moment was so close, she would not risk losing her chance to uncover the truth. Before she could question further, she was whisked away by the maids, who led her to a private bathing chamber. They bathed her with fragrant oils, massaging her skin with care, something that had never happened before. It felt strange to be pampered, especially in this house where the women were usually afterthoughts. When the bath was done, they dressed her in an elaborate silk sari, its deep red color glowing under the oil lamps. For the first time since her marriage, she was made to sit and eat before the men. The meal was a lavish spread, golden rice, sweetened fruits, and delicacies she had never been offered before. Finally, Mansi descended the gold stone stairs, her heart pounding louder with each step. The basement stretched out like a forgotten tomb, dimly lit by flickering oil lamps whose flames twisted in unnatural patterns, casting jagged shadows along the damp stone walls. A heavy chill hung in the air, thick with something unseen but undeniably present. In the center of the room, on a raised stone platform, stood an ancient-looking music box. It was intricately carved, its surface darkened with age and wear. Strange symbols covered the box, etched deep into the wood. The platform beneath it was rough, uneven, like it had been hastily constructed or dug up from deep within the earth. The air around the box felt heavy, almost charged with something Mansi couldn't understand, something that whispered of old secrets. The women moved silently, forming a circle around the platform. Their faces were pale, drained of life, their eyes wide yet empty. Mansi shivered as she took her place among them, her own breathing shallow. Behind them, the men stood in rigid silence, their gazes cold, detached, as if they were watching something inevitable unfold. Sumati, frail but unnervingly composed, stepped toward the music box. Her hands, trembling slightly, wound the crank with deliberate, practiced care. As the box clicked into motion, a low, haunting melody filled the room, each note dripping with an eerie, unnatural resonance. It wasn't just music, it was something alive, something ancient that crept into the cracks of her mind. The sound sent shivers down Mansi's spine, and soon she felt her body betray her. A numbness began creeping up her limbs, the sensation cold and foreign. Her muscles stiffened as though the melody itself had seized control, pulling her into a slow trance. The other women swayed in unison, their bodies moving rhythmically with the haunting tune, their eyes glazing over, lost to whatever dark power lay within the music box. But for Mansi, the pull was weaker. Her partial deafness, once a burden, had become her shield. Though she could hear the melody, it was distant and muffled, like a tune from a far-off world. The spell that ensnared the others barely brushed against her. She felt its power, but she did not fall prey to it. Yet, to survive, she had to pretend. Mimicking the swaying women, she allowed her eyes to go empty, her body moving in rhythm with theirs. But inside, her mind stayed sharp, on high alert. That night, as the music wound to a close and the others slipped deeper into their trances, Mansi was the only one left aware. The dread that had built in her chest intensified, but she dared not show it. She had seen too much. The next morning, the weight of the horrifying truth settled on her like a heavy shroud. The music box was not just a relic of the past. It was a living, breathing entity that demanded something more sinister than devotion. It needed to be fed. Every night, the music drained the essence of the women, turning them into hollow, beautiful shells, docile, obedient, and lifeless. In exchange for their essence, the music box rewarded the men with gold coins, which it spat out into a hidden pit beneath the stone floor after every ritual. This wealth came at an unspeakable price, but the men unaffected by the spell, were blind to the cost. They saw only the glittering gold, oblivious to the slow withering of the women who fed the box's hunger. Mansi watched as Sumati, once vibrant and strong, had become the box's main offering. Sumati alone was allowed to touch it, her frail hands winding its crank night after night, binding herself further to its dark power. Though her outward beauty remained, preserved by the music's eerie magic, Mansi could see the truth. The years were eating away at her from within, aging her soul while leaving her body untouched. The music box consumed her, devouring the core of who she once was. A deep primal fear gripped Mansi. She knew she had to keep pretending, keep playing along, or she too would be consumed by the box's insidious hunger. But she also knew that her immunity to its full power had given her something the others didn't have, a chance to fight back. Curious about the music box's origins, Mansi subtly tried to gather information from the other women, but none seemed to understand its true nature, their minds clouded by the trance-like music. It was as if they had never questioned its existence. Eventually, the old maid whispered to Mansi bits of the box's grim history. But that, as you will come to know, is a story for another time. If you're enjoying the story so far and want to support our new channel, please consider subscribing, liking and sharing this video. Your encouragement means a lot to us as we bring you more mysterious and thrilling tales. Now, to continue with the story. Then came Sumati's 60th birthday. Mansi had no idea of the significance of the day. To her, it seemed like any other evening, until Gopinathan summoned the entire family to the grand hall. The men sat in their usual positions, while the women, including Mansi, stood silently behind them as was tradition. A strange tension filled the air, making Mansi's pulse quicken. Something important was about to happen, but no one explained. Gopinathan, seated at the head of the room, rose, his voice commanding attention. Tonight we discuss a matter that has shaped our family for generations, he began, his tone grave. The music box, our source of wealth and power, must be wound each night by a chosen woman. This woman sustains our fortune. She remains bound to this duty until she turns 60 or dies. The role is sacred, and once chosen, no one can take her life. But rest assured, she will perform her duty. The men of this family will see to that. Mansi felt a chill as Gopinathan's words carried a thinly veiled thread. Her unease deepened as Gopinathan gestured toward Sumati, who had been the keeper of the box for years. Sumati, now frail, stepped forward to announce the next keeper. Her trembling hands clasped before her, Sumati scanned the room. Mansi's heart raced as Sumati's eyes met hers. Mansi, she whispered. The name hung in the air like a sentence. Mansi's blood ran cold. The room fell silent. The daughters-in-law looked shocked, their eyes wide with disbelief. Gopinathan, however, was not surprised. It was he who had made the decision. He believed Mansi's youth and vitality would feed the box more powerfully than any other. He had seen her defiance, her strength, and wanted to break her completely. As the night deepened, a cold mist settled over the ancestral house, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Mansi, draped in the heavy silence of expectation, descended into the dimly lit chamber where the music box awaited her touch, the other women trailing behind like ghosts. Mansi's heart pounded in her chest, her thoughts racing as she stood before the music box, its ancient dark wood gleaming under the flickering oil lamps. She had no way out now. The responsibility of winding the box was hers, and her partial deafness could no longer protect her from its full power. The burden of continuing the cycle, draining the essence of the women, would now fall on her. She glanced around the room, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes. The men watched her with a barely concealed greed, eager for the riches the music box would provide. The women stood like lifeless statues, their faces blank, awaiting the melody that would once again sap them of their vitality. But Mansi had a plan, and she was prepared to execute it. As her fingers hovered over the delicate key of the music box, she froze, her mind flashing back to the moment she had decided on her defiance. After the announcement of her name that afternoon, Mansi didn't have days to figure out a plan. That night she would have to take responsibility. Her mind raced as she recalled the previous nights when she had watched Sumati wind the music box. Every movement, every twist of the thumb had been etched into her memory. It was curiosity that had driven her to observe the mechanism before. But now, that knowledge became her lifeline. In that moment, a plan began to form, a desperate, painful solution. Without a thumb, she knew the box wouldn't be wound properly. The key required precision and force, and without a thumb, the melody would falter. The box's dark magic would weaken. It was a brutal solution, but it was the only way. Mansi had made the agonizing decision to sacrifice her thumb. In the privacy of her room, she had taken a knife, her hand shaking, knowing the unbearable pain that was to come. With a single swift cut, she severed her thumb, her teeth biting into her lip to stop herself from screaming. She had wrapped it in a bandage, hiding the wound beneath her sari, determined to face the consequences head-on. Now, standing in front of her family, Mansi hesitated no longer. She raised her hand toward the key. A collective gasp filled the room. Blood seeped through the bandage, staining the edge of her sari. Her thumb was gone. Gopinathan's face twisted in fury as he understood the gravity of what she had done. The other men shared his rage, their eyes burning with frustration. The thumb was crucial. Without it, the music box could not be wound properly, and the riches they so desperately desired would slip away. But they were powerless. The rules bound them just as much as the women. No one could harm the one chosen to wind the box. Despite their anger, they could do nothing. Mansi felt the fury in the room like a wave. But she stood tall, her hand trembling as she tried to turn the key. Her fingers fumbled without the strength and grip of her thumb. The melody sputtered, weak and uneven, the haunting note struggling to emerge. The trance that usually fell over the women failed to take hold. Their glazed expression began to shift. A flicker of awareness returned to their eyes. The ritual was unraveling. Gopinathan, his face red with barely contained rage, barked an order. "Wind it! Thumb or not, you will finish your duty!" The men loomed over her, forcing her to keep trying. But the notes remained broken, incomplete. The power of the music box faltered, its magic weakened. Mansi's act of defiance had shattered the ritual, and though her hand throbbed with pain, her heart swelled with a fierce, quiet triumph. She had sacrificed her thumb, but in doing so, She had loosened the grip of the box on the women, and the men knew it. Their wealth was slipping through their fingers, and Mansi had made sure they couldn't stop it. In the years that followed, the change was undeniable. The women of the Tarawan family, once subdued and obedient, began to awaken from their long slumber. Freed from the grip of the music box, they slowly rediscovered their true selves. Without its influence, the youthful beauty faded, but they embraced their wrinkles and aging bodies with grace. No longer bound by superficial standards, they found dignity in their natural selves, aging gracefully and reclaiming their rights to live authentically. Each of the four daughters-in-law blossomed into her own person. They developed unique personalities, supporting each other like sisters, proving wrong the long-held belief that women couldn't be true friends. They stood together, laughed together, and shared the burden of their past, forging an unbreakable bond. No longer just wives or mothers, they became individuals of their own aspirations, opinions, and dreams. The men of the family initially struggled without the gold coins or the once submissive women to cater to their whims. Deprived of both wealth and dominance, they were uncertain, but slowly they began to value companionship. Over time, they recognized that the women were not only equals but often more capable in managing the lands and household. As they worked together, the men came to appreciate the women's strengths and intellect. But Gopinathan was a different story. He refused to change, clinging to the old ways, seething in anger at his loss of control. Sumati, who had borne his cruelty for years, devised a fitting revenge. With the family's support, she brought back Gopinathan's first two wives, the women he had sent away long ago. United, the three women taught Gopinathan lessons in respect, compassion, and equality. Their revenge was subtle but powerful, reminding him daily of the strength and resilience of the women he had underestimated. And so, the Tarawan family moved forward, leaving behind the shackles of their past. The family, once ruled by patriarchal dominance, had found a new harmony, one rooted in equality, respect, and shared power. The story of the music box became a symbol of this transformation, a reminder that true beauty and power come from within, and that freedom and equality are worth any sacrifice. This is an original work of fiction created by Echoing Tales, a brand new channel blending suspense and mystery. Join us as we unravel a story shrouded in eerie echoes and spine-chilling twists every week. As we're just starting out, we need your support. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and hit the bell icon to help us keep creating more captivating stories. Until we meet again in the next tale, stay vigilant. And before you sleep tonight, remember to take one last look into the darkness.